Although the Civil War finally brought about the abolition of slavery, a harsh system of white supremacy persisted thereafter. In the early 20th century, African Americans in the South and many parts of the nearby border states were banned from associating with whites in a host of institutions and public accommodations. Some recreational areas posted signs, "Negroes and dogs not allowed."
The colored man knows where he stands. The white man knows where he stands. We have signs saying colored and white. The colored man knows that he is not to enter there.
Racial discrimination deprived Southern blacks of decent jobs and schools and of elementary rights of citizenship, including voting. White intimidation and violence, including lynching, remained an ever-present threat. Black and white liberal reformers struggled to ameliorate these oppressive practices, forming groups like the NAACP in 1909 and the National Urban League in 1911. While African Americans had national organizations, activists operated on the local, grassroots level as well, pressing for an end to school segregation. These bold protesters risked not only their jobs, but also their lives. Homes and churches were burned, and attempts were made to kill African American organizers. Often the goal was equality between black and white schools, rather than racial integration, for many blacks were anxious to maintain their own black-run schools. By 1950, the NAACP's Legal Defense and Educational Fund, led by Thurgood Marshall, decided to battle racial segregation through the courts. The fund's efforts led to the landmark 1954 ruling in Brown v. Board of Education of Topeka. Marshall exclaimed after the decision, "I was so happy I was numb." In December 1955, grassroots activists in Montgomery, Alabama, NAACP members E.D. Nixon and Rosa Parks, among them, sparked what soon became a large-scale boycott of buses and of white-owned businesses in Montgomery. The boycott began after a white bus driver had Parks arrested for refusing to obey rules that required blacks to move to the back of buses when no seats were available for whites.
For a number of years, the Negro passengers on the city bus lines of Montgomery have been humiliated, intimidated, and faced threats on this bus line. Just the other day, one of the fine citizens of our community, Mrs. Rosa Parks, was arrested because she refused to give up her seat for a white passenger. Mrs. Rosa Parks was arrested and taken down to jail, taken from the bus, just because she refused to give up her seat.
I felt that I was not being treated right and that I had a right to retain the seat that I had taken as a passenger on the bus. The time had just come when I had been pushed as far as I could stand to be pushed, I suppose. They placed me under arrest.
The Montgomery movement capitulated the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. to leadership in the civil rights movement.
He is the worst of all the agitators in this country. Now, the best thing for King and all of the so-called freedom riders is to return to their homes, go back to their books, and mind their own business.
By May 1961, the first interracial freedom rides from Washington, D.C. to New Orleans were underway, designed to force Southern officials to honor a recent Supreme Court decision that had called for the ending of racial segregation in interstate bus terminals. In early 1963, Martin Luther King Jr. organized protests in Birmingham, Alabama. Eugene Bull O'Connor, the local police chief, ordered his men to fire blasts of water against demonstrators and unleashed vicious dogs on the resistors.
All you gotta do is tell them you're gonna bring the dogs. Look at them run. I want to see the dogs work.
Television captured a host of striking scenes, some of them showing assaults and arrest of black children, and relayed those images to a stunned national audience. As a result, Many Northerners became aware of the plight of African Americans in the South. As much as any single event in the history of the modern civil rights movement, the violence of whites in Birmingham forced the American people to consider serious federal action promoting civil rights. Though school segregation remained pervasive until the early 1970s, the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was a landmark measure by any standard, ending segregation in a host of public accommodations. As the national scene heated up both in 1954 and again in 1964 with Brown versus Board of Education and the signing of the Civil Rights Act respectively, our states were also reeling from these monumental decisions. In April 1949, Virgil Hawkins and 5 other African Americans applied for admission to professional schools at the University of Florida in Gainesville.
And Virgil Hawkins, a black gentleman from Daytona Beach who had grown up in Oklahoma, Florida in Lake County, had filed, starting in 1949, to integrate higher education, and had applied to go to law school at University of Florida. Virgil won the right, and he appealed many times to the Supreme Court of the United States and the Supreme Court of Florida. He won, but they kept putting all kinds of roadblocks into his path. So in 1958, Virgil made a pact with them, an agreement, 58, and they said, if you will step aside, we'll let other blacks go, but you're a rabble-rouser, you just caused us so many problems, and we don't want you to ever go to this school.
Hawkins sacrificed his own ambition by withdrawing his application for an agreement that other African Americans would at last be enrolled at the University of Florida Law School. Hawkins earned a law degree elsewhere, but his civil rights activities cost him his license. The door that Hawkins kicked down allowed W. George Allen to walk through. In 1962, Allen became the first African American graduate of the University of Florida Law School.
One of the reasons I got into the University of Florida because Virgil made the agreement that he wouldn't go to allow other blacks to go. And since I graduated from the University of Florida in 1962, over 15,000 blacks have graduated from the University of Florida. So that's Virgil's legacy and mine.
In 1970, Allen launched Broward's desegregation efforts. He won a landmark lawsuit forcing the integration of schools. For the next 25 years, Allen was Broward's desegregation watchdog, the man federal judges turned to when they wanted to know whether the Broward County School Board was doing the right thing for black children. While Allen was opening doors in the school system, Henry Latimer was knocking down doors in the courts. Latimer was the first African American circuit court judge in Broward County and was in line to become the first African American president of the Florida Bar when he was killed in a car accident in South Florida. Latimer was appointed to Broward Circuit Court by Governor Bob Graham in 1979. In 1971, Judge Zebedee Wright became the first black male graduate of the Florida State University College of Law. In 1972, Thomas J. Riddick was appointed the first black circuit court judge. Riddick was Broward's first public assistant public defender, the first black court of record judge, and the first black to serve by assignment on the 4th District Court of Appeals. In 1977, Al C. L. Hastings was appointed circuit court judge, serving until 1979. In 1979, President Jimmy Carter nominated Hastings, the first black, to the U.S. District Court, Southern District of Florida, serving until 1989. Hastings was the first black from Broward County elected to serve in Congress from 1993 to present. Al C. knocked down the doors for State Senator Christopher Smith and State Representative Perry Thurston.
Being an African-American attorney, we're blessed. There were a time when we couldn't get into law school. There was those that have the Virgil Hawkins scholarships know that when I went to Florida State University law school, the law school is named after B.K. Roberts. It's B.K. Roberts Hall. B.K. Roberts was the judge that wrote the opinion to keep Virgil Hawkins out of white law schools in Florida. We've gone through so much to get to a legal education. It's a shame not to give back and use it for good.
I think that it all stems from us having an opportunity to get an education, to be educated anywhere we want to be, but also having an opportunity to actually participate. A lot of times people just need a chance, and that's what, as a community, we were given through our ancestors fighting so hard to make these accomplishments. Gave us opportunities, and opportunities that they never had.
In 1991, Carol Y. Taylor was appointed county court judge, followed by appointment as circuit judge in 1995. Taylor was the first Black woman appointed to serve on the 4th District Court of Appeals in 1998. In 2013, Cynthia Everett became the City of Fort Lauderdale's first African-American city attorney.
Well, it's always a good feeling to be chosen. There's no denying that. I understood that it came with a great responsibility, being the first. It's important and it's notable to be the first. But I hope I'm remembered for more than just being the first. I would hope that I'm remembered for what I accomplished during my tenure here.
Paving the way for young attorneys was attorney Raleigh Rawls, who was the first African-American in Broward County to pass the Florida bar. Rawls had graduated from law school in 1957.
Really, the biggest problem I had in practicing law as a Black lawyer was seeing the segregated restrooms, the segregated fountains, and things like that. But on a whole, really, I had no problem out of the judges. Now, some people might say this, but the judges would teach you fair.
Rawls recalled meeting former Atlanta Mayor Andrew Young at Howard University. While in town for a visit, Young had the opportunity to speak with Judge Michael Robinson, who asked Young if he recalled Rawls from those days at Howard. Robinson quoted Young regarding his recollection of his classmate as saying, "He was one of the smartest persons at Howard that I had ever met, including whites, Jews, and Blacks." If one African-American man can be characterized as being smarter than any white, Jew, or Black, then why couldn't one African-American man be the first Black president of the United States of America?
It is that promise that 45 years ago today brought Americans from every corner of this land to stand together on a mall in Washington before Lincoln's memorial and hear a young preacher from Georgia speak of his dream. The men and women who gathered there could have heard many things. They could have heard words of anger and discord. They could have been told to succumb to the fear and frustrations of so many dreams deferred. But what the people heard instead, people of every creed and color, from every walk of life, is that in America, our destiny is inextricably linked, that together our dreams can be won. We cannot walk alone, the preacher cried. And as we walk, we must make the pledge that we shall always march ahead. We cannot turn back. America, we cannot turn back. Not with so much work to be done. Not with so